I don't really make a lot of friends in this business, in part because I'm just a standoffish person. But also part of it is that, like, when I was in comedy, there was always this story that I had read about this group of comedians in the God, I can't remember what the name of this crew of comedians was called at the time, but Alexi Sales is one of them. He wasn't even one of the better comedians in my estimation of that crew, like Rowan Atkinson and I don't know, a bunch of others like there in the late 80s. But he had this thing where he said, like, you know, the worst thing about success is that you become friends with Phil Collins and then you can't really be honest about how bad his music is. You can't make fun of his music. And I know it's a weird thing, a weird quote to remember for over 35 years. But that has stuck with me. So when people like say, like, you're not talking about Anna or Jank or this and that because of friendships, I can assure you that is not the case.
They are very explicitly talking about the TYT stuff, and I'm really so happy to see specifically Sam Cedar state clearly where he stands, because I watched a clip, I don't know if it was on the chat or if it was just for research, where he was reacting to a caller that was like, you really should respond to the Anna experience stuff, like, what are your thoughts? And he quite rightly at the time, with not enough information, was just like, I don't follow every comment, I don't follow every tweet, I don't know the tea. I mean, he didn't say that. He didn't say, I don't know the tea, sis. Just said quite fairly, like, I don't know what's going on. So for them, so this to me shows why they have so much respect as a channel, as a podcast, because he's capable of seeing something happen and change his own status on something and say, look, I didn't know all the facts. We don't stand for this latest, you know, TYT stuff, or I'm not sure if they explicitly said it like that, but what he just said about TYT, the Young Turks, was saying, you know, like, it's a shame that, you know, this is happening. So he's at least addressing it. I don't know what else he's about to say, but I have so much respect for anyone that can change what they thought and admit that they didn't know everything and say, actually, I didn't know all the facts. And with this new information, I now think this. And I think that the people that aren't capable of that, like TYT really, and the whole talk about trans women in sport and how there is research to say that there's no problem there, for them to not want to understand that and to not take any criticism. It looks like Anna Kasparian can't take any criticism in general. I
mean, I have nothing against Anna, but I've never been friends with her. Like, I haven't been non-friends with her. Like, I think I've spoken to her once, maybe. I don't know, in person. For me, the issue is this. Why what they're doing is wrong, and I don't know why they're doing what they're doing. But with this, let me just put it in contrast to, like, why I do this and why I think everybody here does this. We do this here because of the politics first. And then, like, I don't know what the percentage is, but I realize, like, we have to be entertaining, and I like being entertaining, and it's fun in that regard, and this and that, and you can't be just, and I don't even have the mental capacity to just be doing, like, you know, 3 hours of dry interviews. But the point is that what dictates what we do here, and I remember, like, years and years ago, I would get arguments with a caller, like, I shouldn't refer to what we do here as propaganda. Propaganda to me has always been a value neutral term. It is when you have an ideology or a set of issues that you're promoting or whatever it is, you are putting out content in it with an eye to that. I think, like, you know, you could argue that in some way, like, all media is propagandistic in the sense that someone's making an editorial decision. Even what they deem to be newsworthy.
Yeah, just jumping in on that too. I completely agree. I remember learning the term propaganda is not a innately negative term, and it's only perceived to be negative if the news or information being covered is not on the side of the correct place. Does that make sense? But, like, I would say anything political that I cover is in some form and propaganda, but it's propaganda to try and save a minority from further harm. I would say that's a bad thing. Anyway, let's carry back on.
Making an editorial decision. The point being is that we are living in an era right now, which is undeniable, where the right wing, there's been plenty of reporting about this, the Republican Party, the right wing, the conservative movement, all those things, there's not a lot of daylight between any of those things, specifically was shopping around for something to motivate its fundamentalist base. And fall in the wake of gay marriage, not causing typhoons and dogs and cats falling from the sky, they came upon transphobia. And the way that it ended up playing out was in the context of, it dovetailed with some schooling issues and CRT and keeping people home from school and this and that, which not to imply that this is, you know, something that's incredibly novel, but in terms of its growth, it is quite clear what's going on here. There's a concerted effort to do this. You do not spend $50 million in a campaign in Michigan on trans issues unless there is a concerted effort to do that. So that's one reality that lives, that exists right there. And the other reality may be that in your mind, you have an issue with what goes on in women's sports. I'm just going to stipulate that, like, I'm just going to say that's sincere, that you really care about women's sports, okay? And you have some really thoughtful or even non-thoughtful ideas about what should happen in women's sports. If you do what we do here, which is what is going to help not immiserate a specific group of people, or what is going to mitigate doing that, or how do we protect those people? Even if you believe deep down, like I feel very strongly about, you know, women's sports,
right? Which,
you know, people can be a little skeptical of that case in some instances, but regardless, I'm sure there's somebody. It is.
This is such a good point. Like I remember growing up and not liking sport at all, and then seeing the like depiction of female sport and being like, this is a sexist issue. Like no one watches female football. Like, and the mass consciousness idea of like, well, there's no money in it, and just being completely bizarre to me. But like, there is no mistaking that this current narrative about trans women in sport, trans people in general, is manufactured for a reason, and they're trying specifically to find something that a lot of people might jump on board with. And my husband's running around getting ready in the house, and it's just broke my thought pattern. Maybe I didn't have another thought. Let's watch the rest. That's so funny.
Coming upon you, you don't have to speak about it, because it is contributing to an environment that is wreaking violence on a group of people in our society who have very little political or material protection. And that's just the reality of it. There is no excuse. I'm going to speak my mind. I'm not going to shut up about my opinions. It is incumbent upon you, and it's acutely problematic if this is the biggest online left of center outlet that exists.
Yeah. And I will say that if you do choose to speak about it, which I think I have in particular, I will go further and say I think it's incumbent upon you, if you are a part of the left, to be militant in support of trans activists, because I think the excuse that's given is that this is a wedge issue, and not conceding the point that somebody might have a different muscle structure if they're a trans person, blah, 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 is helping the right. I don't agree with that at all, actually. I think conceding the framing is much more helpful to the right than being an advocate. I think being an advocate, you're providing a counter narrative for a wedge issue that is being used cynically by the right, not being brought up by the leftist activists or the trans activists. They're
Again, let's also talk about what the Young Turks and TYT and Anna Kasparian and Jen were all asking when they said, okay, well, understand about trans rights and everything, but don't support trans women in sport because it's not a winning issue. You'll lose the opinion of the electorate. Let's break that down for a second, okay? So what they're actually asking there is the outright discrimination, which is what it is, absolutely, even if it's justified, the outright discrimination of a minority of people, if the majority of the electorate feel that it is important to do so. What on earth is that BS? I'm sorry. Let's break that down. So they're saying, okay, if most people think something and it's popularly an opinion, even if people aren't very educated in the medical and psychotherapy behind, this extremely difficult issue, if the majority of people think something and they have the power to vote, then you should just be on board with it so that they vote for you. Regardless as to the actual truth behind that minority or what really is happening behind the scenes and what medical professionals say and what the minority themselves say and how they're depicted. Don't worry about that. Just worry about what the electorate think, because that will get you voted. I'm sorry? And what? Has history taught us anything? And also, I don't care. That's probably why they're a minority, and so they should be protected. Like, that's bizarre. Yeah, exactly. As the chat's saying, bargain a few of your rights away for some theoretical tactical gain, even though Benny provided it wasn't a losing issue. Exactly. It wasn't even a losing issue, and we can see this anyway. I think actually it's done a lot more harm for conservative and Republican issues, which is, in my opinion, a good thing. But let's detach this political discussion away from human rights of a minority of people. That is, the fact that they would even put that in the same category, it shows that no one is paying attention. Why should we just do what everyone says? It's like that, age-old idea of well, if all of your friends jumped off a bridge, would you do the same? And it's like, what the hell? For TYT to say that, it really and that's why it's had such a huge striking effect. And like the chat just said, Benny proved that it wasn't even a losing issue. And as everyone that has looked into the medical research behind it shows, that trans women in sports is much more of a complex issue, and it's not as clear cut as the one time that it's okay to discriminate trans people. And it's also been linked back, like the majority report just said, to being a clear weapon by the right to get public opinion on their side after losing it with trans women in toilets and stuff like that. So for TYT to not get that is relevant. And if that's how you found my channel, because that topic I covered a few weeks ago, then good, because it is a huge turning point for how this is covered. And it's really separated people that have the information that should be covering it and that don't, and that are talking the talk and not walking the walk. I hope that made sense. Sorry, it was a bit of a heated ramble, wasn't it? Ooh.
Responding to it with protection. It's inverted, the focus.
But even that, first off, we can see data. We can see data, and we know how this plays in elections.
We saw it in this last midterms. Yeah.
Now, you can show me a poll that says people don't want, trans women to play in women's sports. But I can also show you a poll that 75% of people want gun control. If you want to come and say that this is an electoral issue, come with data.
I can show you a poll that MLK had a 25% approval rating at the time of his death. I mean, we can't just be fighting for what's popular in the moment, because then you're saying that you can't change the framing around that.
But even if you're saying it's popular in the moment, it's not resonating from an electoral standpoint. That's why I think that is
anti-trans.
Exactly.
Right.
I think that is a excuse.
They aren't the post,
because you would lead with that. Okay. As much as we heard, like, it's one thing to say, like, I don't think, defund the police is the most artful slogan there is. But to harp on it, you're just doing the work of what it turned out to be the corporate Democrats who wanted an excuse for why they were going to lose their elections, as opposed to the reality of the whole thing.
In fact, that does help corporate Democrats. It's a good point.
And it's very hard for me to believe. Well, let me put it this way. It's incumbent upon people who do what we do to be able to make that assessment. And that is being like, I have no idea what's going on over there. I'm not in contact with anybody over there. And, my speculation and conjecture is no more informed, probably less so, than, people in this audience. But in terms of what I think is a responsibility and where a bar lies, while we're at it, in terms of the affirmative action thing, if anybody, including Jank, thinks that, black people are going to get more respect now in colleges because there's no affirmative action, you're insane. That's absurd.
Yeah. I mean, to put it as succinctly as possible, there's a finite number of things that we can focus on. Matt says that quite a bit. And I think it's incredibly important in our industry to focus on the things that are going to make sure that there are as much protections as humanly possible for trans people, for marginalized communities in this country. And I believe that focusing on...
Absolutely. You've got to love Emma. She is the actual one. She's my favorite person at the moment. Well said.
The language of activists that are on the margins and that are incredibly anecdotal is in fact serving a far right agenda.
100%.
Yeah.
And it is really problematic to have the biggest center of left, I don't know where you want to put them or where they would put themselves on some type of spectrum, whatever.
Progressives, Home of Progressives is the title.
I mean, it's a problem.
Yeah, and that's not just the two of them that work there, I want to say, right? Like, there are a lot of great people that work in TYT, a lot of great people who are leftists and progressives that I don't think want to be associated with this.
Right. I mean, but without like even getting into like the internal politics there, that's for people to suss out themselves. I have always had both a tremendous amount of respect for people who say, like, I don't like this work environment and I'm going to do whatever I can to reverse it. And if part of that means I'm going to quit this job and I'm going to do it in a public way, I mean, we've begged people to do that during the course of like the Iraq War and whatnot. Certainly there was a ton of that, with the I mean, I have a tremendous amount of respect for that. I also understand, because of the nature of the society we live in, that there may be people there who are like, whatever it is, the job that I do here is not terribly easily replicated somewhere else. And this is a time of contraction with these things. And, I've got college loans because I just, bought a house or.
Yeah, I agree that it's great if you can quit a job to make a stance, especially on a public forum. And they're probably talking about Benny, and it's fantastic for her to do so. I wish all the best for her, but like, not everyone can do that and afford to do that, which is a good point. I think I'm going to probably wind it down there though. I've had an absolutely amazing time covering the Majority Report. I think I'm probably going to cover what I'll probably do for these live streams, the casual ones, where I cover LGBT news, specifically trans news. I'm going to cover the Majority Report if there's nothing else crazy happening in the media, and if not, I will cover something like this come out. But otherwise, yeah, this is your local shop for coverage of trans and LGBT stuff, especially on things like the Majority Report. Thank you so much for everyone that stuck around, especially from the beginning. Bye Valerie, bye everyone else. Phoebe, if you're still around, thank you so much. Tron Guy from the beginning, and it was someone else as well, something Unhinged Resolver. If you're still around, thank you so much. And if not, please do drop a chat to let me know who you were. We do also have super chats, which is amazing. So if anyone is in the position to be able to support the channel, please do. It would mean the absolute world to me. So yeah, thanks so much again for sticking around. I'm probably going to call it there. Have a wonderful week. I love you all very much. I'll see some of you tomorrow and a lot of you during the week. I love you all. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Trans woman shares powerful transition story. Imagine if it was me and I had rung in as like a as like a plot twist. I was like, actually, I'd love to ring in the majority report. I should do that. Right, okay, let's go.